So you've worked together for 30 years. Could you tell me how you approach a new production?
Trying to remember, it's such a long time. We started working on this piece at least 3 years ago.
Okay.
So remembering the genesis of the production is actually quite difficult.
One has to sit with the abstract sound for a long time and make sure that the situation we create is going to fit with that, because you could make errors. In the case of Lucia, of course, there are many, many recordings, so we could sit for hours and listen to those recordings. But finally, our responsibility is for what the audience see, not what they hear. And that's quite tricky with formal problems like bel canto, which is very sort of artificial structurally, rather like a sort of da capo aria from the Baroque period, same sort of problems. How do we manage to provide a situation so that the theatrical action can move in a lifelike way, whilst there's this very sort of elaborate, artificial musical form? And trying to fit the two together is very, very tricky. We did come up with a good idea, but I mean, it's going to stand the test of time, isn't it? So we came up with an idea with this piece to have two simultaneous things to watch.
Could you expand on that? So two simultaneous, as in two different spaces?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, we became very excited, didn't we, by the idea that there were some big scenes missing for Lucia. And because I can't speak for Vicky, but I can speak for myself, I have a very strong feminist agenda. My focus for this opera is 100% on the female characters, Elisa and Lucia. And I wanted to find a way of explaining why Lucia does a lot of the things that she does, particularly why she goes so-called insane. And so we discussed, didn't we, the idea that we might actually stage the murder of Arturo.
Which is normally off stage.
That's normally off stage.
Back,
that's reported by Raimondo to the chorus. So and once we'd let that idea out, it was like Pandora's box. Whoa! All these other things fluttered up, and we realised that we could provide a lot of additional data about what Lucia does whilst the male characters are singing about her. So we came up with this idea of split screen. So, for example, at the beginning, you have Normanno and his chaps searching for Edgardo on one side of the stage, this side, and on the other side you see Elisa and Lucia sneak into their brother's dressing room and steal his clothes, because after all, if we have a Lucia with high IQ, she ain't going to head out into that dangerous place in her frock.
That might
because
give her
then
away.
she will be spotted. It's a big white frock as well. So we thought she should disguise herself as a man, as should Elisa. So we sort of started to weave together this idea of showing the bits of Lucia that I really would love to see, as well as doing what normally happens.
What are the kind of key themes, or what's the mood of this design, and what's the mood of the world?
I think in terms of mood or tone, we're trying to work with the musical soundtrack, with the musical score, to support the intensity. I mean, you just heard what intensely romantic context it is musically. And so we wanted to create dual environments that gave a real sort of weight to the characters involved, and so a substantial sense of who these people are, that they're not only a sort of gothic set of characters, as you might imagine from the Walter Scott novel. They're really inhabited characters, you know, that sense of profound sort of existential romanticism that comes out of the score. And we just wanted to really give that a feeling of being lodged in the time of composition. So tonally, it's kind of Gothic romanticism.
Yeah.
But historically, the novel is 1707.
That's right. That's when it's
supposed to be set.
Yeah.
Walter wanted that. And then, so we have repositioned it to 1830, 1840.
Yeah, around the time of composition.
Around the time of composition, but also around the time of very important period for feminism with the Brontes and all those amazing women like Mary Anning, who were, you know, early feminists, fossil hunters. and scientists. So it's a period where you can park a 40-year-old woman very happily, because we decided that normally Lucia, the singers who sing Lucia have to be quite mature vocally to be able to deliver it. And we didn't want to have a late 30s, early 40-year-old singer playing 19. I think I don't want to see that any longer. So I thought, well, why don't we have her play her own age? So we have a 40-year-old Lucia, and obviously she's on the shelf by the standards of 1840s, and she's having a great time. Her bedroom's full of painting, art, fossil collections, and a whole range. She had a wonderful time, but obviously just before the opera's begun, she's fallen in love for the first time. And so we were very interested to somehow make it work historically, and we're being very, very precise, aren't we, about a historical period, in order to release the scale of the passion and the speed with which it all gets devastated for her.
Yeah, the catastrophe, the sort of dramatic catastrophe that happens.
So nothing, her whole life she lived thinking she would never have love, never have children. And then suddenly, the opportunity comes, she lives it for a bit, and it's taken away. And obviously it leads to an enormous mental breakdown. I don't think it's clinical madness, if we were to be like strictly psychiatric about it. I think she has just killed a man. And that's, we staged that, and it takes a long time. She actually does it with her maid. But if you see them struggling and not being able to kill, it's terrifying. So you understand why she suddenly stumbles into the so-called mad scene in quite a state.
And could you tell me how the set and the design of the costumes, how does that world kind of impact on Lucia and force her into this corner which pushes her into the non-mad scene?
What's become very useful for really deepening our understanding of the character in the way that Katie's describing is how costume works for women of the time that we're setting it, so around 1830, 1840, which is corseted, which is crinoline, cage. Actually, the language of clothes is very much about what women could do in them. So if you're wearing something like that, your movement is prescribed by it. And so, of course, what happens when you take it off?
The release.
There's a transformation of a kind, and so how obedient you are to those rules, or how you choose to transgress them, or how you employ the rules of clothing to your own purposes, it very much became part of the language of the show. So dressing and undressing happens a lot.
Okay.
And of course then there is the moment when Lucia is agreed to marry, and she must then present herself as a bride, and that's another taking on of a role. A reluctant role for her, of course, but at that point she thinks she's been betrayed, so she agrees. And so she is dressed very much as a bride, in a wedding dress, in a veil. So she has adopted that role, she's agreed to do that, and she pictorially is exactly that.
Yeah, when you see a woman get into all of those layers, which you see in the action, you really understand a bit of history. You can see what happens to your body when it's put into these sort of structures.
Containers.
And then when you start to move, you knock chairs over, and other people as well, but you're not only completely locked into a sort of structured prison, but it knocks things down, so you don't even have any sense of your own relationship to space. I mean, they are quite shocking machines to watch women get into, aren't they?
As well as being extraordinarily beautiful.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the paradox.
And the space around, so we've talked about the different playing areas, and we're constantly having action simultaneously going on. Is the space claustrophobic? What kind of world is she living in?
We've given no exterior spaces.
Okay.
I mean, we've sort of tried to bring our exterior world into an understandable sort of semi-interior world in terms of this tomb area. And that was partly to give a sense of no escape.
How do you want the audience to feel, having come to see this production? What do you want them to take away?
You can't ever say what an audience is going to feel. I mean, an audience is such a complicated thing. Every night is a group of incredibly very different psychologies and class, background, everything. I mean, one single person may have come through the most awful trauma. They may have lost someone the day before, and they're going to have a certain relationship, and someone else may just really be coming to the Royal Opera House to have a champagne and fall asleep in their seat, you know? It could be anything. So you couldn't ever say what you were going to ask anyone to feel, you know? We do our best to make the story and the emotions and the world of it clear and beautiful, but what you take from it, we could never say.